In a busy military base at the crack of dawn, a group of young soldiers heading out for training decide to harass an elderly gate guard, mocking his slow movements, faded uniform, and worn-out boots. They laugh at his trembling hands, call him outdated, and ridicule him for working a small job at a big base. But what they don't know is that the old man once commanded operations they've only read about in history books. And when the base commander arrives moments later, what happens next will shock everyone. Keep listening, and which city are you listening from? And if you enjoy the story, please subscribe for more. The sun had just begun climbing above the horizon, spilling a pale orange glow across the military installation. The morning air vibrated with the sounds of boots striking pavement, engines warming up, and drill sergeants barking orders in the distance. At the main gate, an elderly guard stood beside the small security booth, scanning IDs with slow, deliberate movements. His back was slightly bent, his beard white, and his faded blue uniform carried years of sun, dust, and work. His hands trembled when he lifted each ID card, but his eyes, steel gray and deeply lined, were focused and attentive. A group of young soldiers approached the gate in a cluster, laughing loudly, full of morning energy and the arrogance of youth. One nudged another, pointing at the old guard with a mocking grin. "Look at this guy," he whispered just loud enough for the guard to hear. "Bet he barely remembers where he is." Another smirked, stepping forward with exaggerated swagger. "Sir, do you need help holding the scanner? Looks pretty heavy for someone your age." The rest laughed as if it were the funniest joke of the day. The old guard didn't respond. He simply held out a hand for the next ID, calm but visibly hurt. His hands shook slightly, not from anger but from age. He scanned each card, offered a polite nod, and tried to ignore the growing hostility, but the soldiers weren't done. One pretended to move in slow motion, dragging his feet and hunching his back. Another spread his arms dramatically. "How did you even get this job? Shouldn't you be in a nursing home?" Their snickers echoed off the metal gate fencing. A few passing soldiers slowed their pace, glancing over with discomfort but not daring to intervene. The gate was usually quiet at this hour, and no one expected a scene like this. The old guard lifted his gaze from the scanner. There was no anger in his eyes, only sadness and something deeper, something weighted with memories. The smallest soldier in the group stepped forward, shoving his ID mere inches from the old man's face. "Scan it, Grandpa, we don't have all day." He laughed again, and the group followed, their voices bouncing sharply across the early morning air. The old guard's hand trembled as he scanned it. He whispered something barely audible. "Respect the uniform, son." They mocked him for that too, but before their laughter could echo a second time, the sound of tires crunching gravel cut sharply through the air. A black command vehicle rolled toward the gate. The atmosphere changed instantly. Conversations died. Postures stiffened. Because stepping out of the vehicle was the base commander, and the moment his eyes landed on the old gate guard, everything changed. The base commander stepped out of the black vehicle with the sharp precision of a man who had spent decades leading soldiers through chaos and order alike. His uniform was immaculate, his posture rigid, and his eyes scanned the gate with the instinct of someone who noticed everything. He took barely 3 steps before his expression shifted, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally a stunned recognition that froze him mid-stride. The young soldiers who had been laughing at the old guard quickly straightened, pulling their uniforms taut, hoping their behavior had gone unnoticed. But the commander wasn't looking at them. His gaze was locked on the elderly gate guard, whose trembling hands still held the small ID scanner. The old man looked up, puzzled by the sudden silence, unaware of the storm that had just begun shifting around him. The commander's breathing grew uneven, as if he were staring at a ghost he thought he'd never see again. Meanwhile, the young soldiers exchanged nervous glances, unsure why the commander's face had drained of color. They had never seen him like this, not in morning briefings, not during surprise inspections, not even during disciplinary meetings. One whispered under his breath, "Why's he looking at the old man like that?" The commander finally moved, stepping forward slowly, almost cautiously, as if approaching a sacred relic. But before he reached the guard, he turned his attention sharply to the group of young soldiers. His eyes burned with a fury so controlled it was more terrifying than shouting. "Who here just raised their voice at this man?" he asked, his tone low and crisp. No one answered. The commander's jaw tightened. "I'm not asking," he growled. "I am ordering you. Who flinched at him? Who mocked him? Who—" He stopped as the smallest of the soldiers swallowed hard and stepped forward, his face pale. "Sir, we were only joking," he stuttered. "We didn't mean anything by it." The commander's eyes darkened. "You don't joke with him," he said sharply. "You don't speak down to him. You don't so much as breathe disrespect in his direction." The young soldier blinked, completely lost. "Sir, he's just a gate guard." The air went so still that even the distant sound of morning PT seemed to fade. The commander turned slowly to face the old man again. He took a step closer, emotion tightening his features. He whispered something under his breath, words so soft only the guard could hear. The guard's eyes widened slightly, as if remembering a life he had deliberately left behind. The commander then turned back toward the soldiers, his voice rising just enough to echo off the metal gate. "That is not just a gate guard. That man trained half the leaders on this base before you were even born." The soldiers' eyes widened. Murmurs spread through the small crowd that had gathered. The commander stepped closer to the young troops, his voice now trembling with anger. "That man saved lives, more lives than you will ever know. He built the foundation this base stands on." The smallest soldier stammered, "Yes, sir, who is he?" The commander took a deep breath, eyes never leaving the elderly guard. "He is one of the most decorated warriors this installation has ever seen." The old man's shoulders sagged slightly, humbled and uneasy. But the truth was out now, and nothing would stop what was coming next. The commander stepped even closer to the old gate guard, his boots slowing as if every memory he carried weighed them down. The young soldiers watched with a mixture of dread and confusion, their earlier arrogance evaporating in the presence of something they could not yet comprehend. The commander finally stopped directly in front of the elderly guard, and for a moment neither man spoke. The old guard held the scanner loosely, his hands trembling from age, not fear. The commander's eyes softened with an emotion the young soldiers had never seen on his face, reverence. Then, in one swift motion, he lifted his hand into a crisp, flawless salute aimed directly at the old man. The soldiers gasped. The gate staff froze. The entire checkpoint seemed to stop breathing. This was not a casual greeting or a polite gesture. This was a salute reserved for legends, men whose stories were carved into the bones of military history. The elderly guard looked startled, almost uncomfortable, and slowly returned a smaller, humble salute. The commander's voice broke the silence. He spoke loudly enough for every soldier within 20 feet to hear. "For those who don't know, this man once led a unit that most of you aren't even cleared to read about." The young soldiers stiffened, suddenly aware that the ground beneath them had shifted. The commander continued, his tone steady but emotional. He commanded missions that decided the fate of entire operations. When others ran for cover, he ran toward danger. He carried wounded soldiers under fire when he himself was bleeding. The bullies exchanged horrified glances, their faces draining of color as they realized they had mocked someone whose boots they weren't worthy to shine. The commander wasn't finished. "I was a young lieutenant when he saved my platoon," he said. "We were pinned down for hours, no reinforcements, no way out." His voice tightened. "And then this same man you just humiliated, walked through gunfire like a storm he'd survived 1,000 times. He dragged men out 2 at a time. He refused evacuation until every soldier was accounted for." The courtyard fell dead silent. Even the distant hum of traffic seemed to bow in respect. The commander turned slowly, face darkening as he looked at the young soldiers. "And you thought you could mock him, harass him, laugh at him?" The smallest soldier's lips trembled. "Sir, we didn't know." The commander's response was ice cold. "Then you should have acted like soldiers instead of children." The old gate guard shifted uncomfortably, murmuring, "Let them be, they're young." The commander looked at him, then back at the troops. "He's merciful," he said, "but I am not." The young soldiers now stood stiff as boards, fear settling in their stomachs, but something else was happening too. The old man stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on the boy who had mocked him the most. His voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "Strength is not found in mocking the weak," he said. "It's found in lifting others up." The boy swallowed hard, eyes burning with shame. And in that moment they all understood. The punishment would come, but the lesson would last much longer. The commander's jaw tightened as he stepped back, letting the weight of the moment settle over every soldier at the gate. The young troops stood paralyzed, staring at the old guard with a mixture of awe, regret, and disbelief. The elderly man lowered his gaze, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, his fingers brushing against the faded fabric of his uniform as if grounding himself in the present. The commander turned sharply toward the gathered soldiers and ordered them to form a line, his voice cutting through the air like a drill instructor on a warpath. Instinctively, the young troops snapped into position, though their faces betrayed rising panic. The commander began pacing in front of them, his voice steady but scorching. He spoke of honor, not the kind worn on a sleeve or plastered on a wall, but the kind earned through quiet sacrifice. He pointed at the old guard and said that the man had never boasted, never demanded recognition, never sought privilege, even though he had more right to those things than any of them. He explained that the gate guard had returned to the base years after retiring, choosing the quiet life of a watchman because he believed service never truly ended. The soldiers listened, their earlier arrogance shattered, replaced now by a burning shame. The commander then assigned consequences, not out of anger but education. The young soldiers would report every morning for additional duty, assisting at the gate, learning discipline and humility from the very man they mocked. The smallest soldier's eyes widened, realizing he would now stand beside the man he had humiliated. But the commander wasn't finished. He turned to the old guard and asked if he wished to impose any specific punishment. The veteran simply shook his head, his expression gentle. "What they need isn't punishment," he said softly. "What they need is purpose." The commander nodded slowly, understanding. He dismissed the formation, but not without one final order. Every soldier present would give a proper salute to the old guard before leaving. One by one, the troops complied. Some saluted stiffly, others hesitantly, all of them struggling to make eye contact. The old man returned each salute with quiet humility. When the young soldier who had shoved his ID in the guard's face approached, he paused, trembling slightly. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Sir, I'm sorry." The old guard placed a hand on his shoulder, not reprimanding but reassuring. "You still have time," he whispered, "to become the man you want to be." The boy nodded, overwhelmed by the kindness he didn't deserve. As the crowd dispersed, a strange calm settled over the gate. The commander remained for a moment longer, standing beside the old guard in silence. Then he leaned closer and murmured, "They don't make men like you anymore." The old veteran simply sighed, lifting his gaze toward the rising sun. "Then teach them," he said quietly, "teach them to be better." And with that, he returned to scanning IDs as though he hadn't just changed the course of a dozen young soldiers' lives. The day moved on, but something had shifted permanently at the base gate. Word spread like wildfire, across platoon rooms, through the barracks, into the chow hall, that the quiet old gate guard wasn't just some retiree passing time. He was a warrior whose stories instructors still whispered about during leadership briefings. By noon, soldiers who usually walked past him without a second glance began offering respectful nods, crisp salutes, and genuine greetings. Some slowed their pace just to thank him. The old man accepted each gesture with humble discomfort, never letting his chest swell, never revealing even a hint of pride. He simply kept scanning IDs, offering a gentle nod as though the morning's events were nothing extraordinary. Meanwhile, the young soldiers who had mocked him that morning arrived for their first assigned duty shift, faces pale but determined. The commander watched from a distance, arms crossed, making sure none dared take the responsibility lightly. The smallest soldier, who had mocked the veteran the most, approached with trembling steps. He stood at attention, ID clipped neatly, boots polished, posture rigid. "Reporting for duty, sir," he said quietly. The old guard looked at him for a long moment, seeing not arrogance now, but a boy trying to undo the damage he had caused. The veteran handed him a fresh logbook and pointed toward the incoming traffic lane. "You'll watch with me," he said, "not as punishment, as learning." And so the boy stood beside him for hours, watching how the old man checked IDs with meticulous care, how he greeted every soldier with dignity, how he never rushed or judged or dismissed anyone. It wasn't glamorous work, but it taught discipline, patience, and humility, traits the boy realized he desperately needed. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the commander returned to check on them. What he saw made him pause. The young soldier, once full of mockery, was now standing straight, scanning IDs with steady hands, mirroring the old man's posture, copying the old man's tone, learning respect through action rather than lecture. The commander smiled slightly, a rare expression. "Looks like he's in good hands," he said. The old guard didn't look up. "Every soldier starts somewhere," he answered softly. When the shift ended, the boy hesitated before leaving. He looked at the old guard with genuine emotion. "Sir, I mean, thank you for everything." The veteran nodded. "Remember this," he said, eyes soft. "Strength isn't measured by how loudly you command, it's measured by how quietly you protect." The boy swallowed hard and saluted, this time properly, respectfully, sincerely. The old man returned the salute with a steady hand. As the evening settled over the base, the gate lights flickered on and the old veteran resumed his post, silent, steady, and unseen by many, yet shaping lives all the same. And from that day forward, no one on that base ever mocked the gate guard again. Because now they knew the truth. The strongest men often stand in the quietest places.